We've all seen the movies where a hero is having the fight of his life and each swing of his blade dismembers another victim. It makes for glory goodness in the movies. Does it work in D&D? I mean, the short answer is no, it doesn't, unfortunately. For multiple reasons. I'll go over the good aspects of critical tables first and then explain why after I still think it's a poor system. The first benefit is that it makes every battle tense until the last baddie is dead. Everyone has had a combat that the party has breezed through with no real threat to the party, either due to really good rolls or poor balancing on your part. Or one that is dragging on and it's only a matter of time until they finally roll good enough to kill the few remaining enemies who don't stand a chance. With critical tables, every roll could be a disaster. I'd argue that there are better ways to speed up combat. D&D is already random enough. But sure, knowing every attack roll could mean hitting your own party and potentially dismembering them would make me nervous when my dual-wielding fighter uses his action trigger. The strangest argument I hear is that it makes combat more realistic. Without arguing whether realism is worth trying to achieve in a fantasy game, that just falls flat. Though it gets kind of muddy. The real world isn't Braveheart, where a swing of a sword would always dismember an armored opponent. If you're wearing armor of any sort, you'd most likely break an arm before it gets cut off. There's a reason why the guillotine was invented, because even under ideal circumstances, using an axe on an unarmored, defenseless opponent, cutting all the way through was tough. However, then the argument that this isn't human fighting, there are superhumans, 10 is an average human, and a lot of monsters, and most heroes having higher scores than 10. I mean, sure, you're a superhuman, but your body is still as fragile as a regular as humans. I don't want to argue this, so let's just say it makes combat more realistic this way, just to move on. Another argument for them is that they're fun. Sure, everyone has their own idea of fun, and if everyone at your table thinks it's fun, by all means, have a blast. However, if you're a new DM, I would strongly suggest you don't use any kind of critical tables. In theory, they should be cool, but in practice, I have to disagree. The consequences for the players are just much greater than the consequences for evil goblin number 53. If your player loses an arm, it will cripple them until the character dies or they get high enough level spells. If goblin number 53 loses an arm, goblin number 54 will fill his spot nicely. I think most GMs want their players to have a connection with their characters. It should mean something when tragedy strikes, and it shouldn't come down to a random roll they consistently have to make. Another reason is it punishes martial characters more heavily than casters. If every attack roll could mean potential disaster, the classes that make the least amount of attack rolls are going to be the best class. Now, instead of just being able to bend reality to their whims, casters get to sit back and cast spells that only require a saving throw, while they laugh at their fighter friend who gets punished for leveling up and punished for using a key class mechanic in Action Surge. For example, a level 1 fighter has a 5% chance of critical failure per turn, while a level 11 fighter has a 14% chance of critical failure. Now that means they have a higher chance to critically hit as well, but we just went over why that wouldn't balance it out, because the punishment is always going to be worse for the players than the enemies. To be fair, some people don't want to use most extreme tables where dismemberment or attacking party members is a possibility. They merely want to slightly punish their players for having the audacity of rolling a natural 1 5% of the time. There are still two problems with it. I've yet to see one of these less extreme tables that doesn't cause them to be more likely to fail in the future, which can unbalance the encounter, either by making them waste more resources than they already have when they miss, by making them lose the rest of their turn or some lesser variant of that, or the punishment is so minor that it just slows combat without really adding anything to it. For the first two punishments, I would say that encounter building is hard enough, trying to make combat different and interesting enough that it doesn't just become a slog of trying to slay a horde of the same monsters over and over again, while trying to keep it balanced enough that the players feel challenged without them feeling like they're banging their head against a wall. Giving a player a disadvantage or a penalty to AC will make them more likely to fail again in the future. This punishes the frontline classes more than caster classes again, or mess with the finicky action economy of 5e. To the last point, if the punishment doesn't mean anything at all it does is slow down the slowest part of the game more. Personally, I'm constantly trying to come up with ways of speeding up combat encounters, so a basic encounter doesn't take an extended period of time. I use a lot of automation because I play online and most of my enemies fear for their lives and will try to retreat or surrender if the outcome is obvious to everyone. Rolling another d20 and looking it up on a table isn't worth it if it isn't going to mean anything. At the end of the day, D&D is already one of the most random RPGs out there, because it relies on a d20 roll instead of multiple d6s, where a level 20 has a 5% chance of failing critically on one attack, just the same as a level 1 does. You don't need to add more, in my opinion, and you don't need to find more things to slow combat down with. And I'm just going to completely contradict what I said somewhat. I've played around with critical tables, which are completely in control of the player's hands, and I have to say it's worked so far. First off, it doesn't happen in combat, it only happens in jousting tournaments, which are completely optional. Then during jousting, I have a bunch of different positions and postures which will affect their ability to be hit, or hit back, or be knocked off their horses. Also, they have the option of keeping your eyes on the target, which makes you more likely to hit, but what we've all learned from A Knight's Tale...
This Liechtenstein, his technique, rudimentary, style, non-existent still. He is fearless.
Fearless? How so?
The slit in a helmet's visor is narrow, but splinters can penetrate it. Most knights raise their chins at the last instant. You lose sight of your opponent, but you protect your eyes. This Ulrich doesn't.
So they get a bonus to hit, but they could potentially get a splinter in their eye, which would blind them in one eye. So far, only one player has critically failed while they were keeping their eyes on the target, but they only got an eye scar out of it. No penalties. It seems like everyone has liked it so far. It's completely optional, so they won't get a disability while doing something mandatory. It adds a sense of gambling to an otherwise straightforward side encounter. Do they risk potential injury for a better chance of winning fame and fortune? Even if they never risk injury, every pass you can see them wrestle with the decision if they should or shouldn't keep their eyes on target, and makes each round a tough decision instead of just rolling dice and seeing who wins. At the end of the day, you're the GM, so you can do what you want. I would strongly advise against them, especially for new DMs who might not know what they're getting into. I do see the appeal of them though, and I really do enjoy them when they're completely optional and it isn't something constantly hanging over your head during combat. As always, remember,
through defeat you shall find victory.
What's that supposed to mean?
It means the warranty is run out on Dungeon Master's brain.